I ranked every pseudo-legendary Pokemon by WolfeyVGC.
What is the best pseudo-legendary Pokemon? Or maybe you want to know what the worst pseudo-legendary Pokemon is, or maybe you're thinking, what is a pseudo-legendary Pokemon? Well, a pseudo-legendary Pokemon is a fan term used to describe a very specific subset of Pokemon. These Pokemon have to meet 3 specific criteria. They have to evolve 2 times, their base stats have to add to a total of 600, and they have to level up slowly. These Pokemon are kind of the bridge between regular Pokemon and official legendary Pokemon. And with the exception of Generation 3, every single generation adds 1 new pseudo-legendary Pokemon. And for the most part, these Pokemon are really strong. In fact, even the worst of the pseudo-legendary Pokemon isn't actually that bad. And right now, there's exactly 10 of them, which I thought could be fun for a top 10 list. Right. I guess it's not actually like a top 10 list if there's only 10 of them, but you get the point. Anyway,
it technically classifies. So I'm noticing a little bit, it's definitely his hair. As somebody who, when my hair grows longer, I definitely get like Roman curls in my hair. Is probably going to wreak havoc on a green screen for chroma key. I'm noticing a little chroma keying around some of his hair strands, but honestly, like, the mic is consistent. He sounds warm. It sounds like he actually has like mic equipment. I'm loving this. So I started watching Wolfey back during Sun and Moon, before he was bringing Lowland Executor to events. I mean, like, I've been watching him for a minute. Like, have a lot of respect for the dude. Is able to put in some work in terms of VGC. I know there was some criticism. I think it was Black and White, where he brought a Magmar that couldn't technically exist because of the moveset. I'd have to delve into it. I think I found that technically the Magmar couldn't exist. At the same time, anything allegations in regards to cheating come out in regards to Pokemon, I just bring up Pokemon should be making it easier anyways. Gen 5 is notorious for being a full-time job in terms of competitive Pokemon. Modern Pokemon still is notorious for kind of being a full-time job. If you do want to stop a lot of the cheating, you just make it easier for players to do certain things, right? I do bring up there is no negative bottle cap as well. So it does benefit you to have a 0 IV Torkoal, right? 0 speed IV, or speed IV, 0 speed EV Torkoal to use in Trick Room, does it not? But what happens if you want to change your IVs? You can't do that. You can bottle cap up, you cannot bottle cap down. So if we eliminated a lot of these barriers, I think that a lot more people would come into Pokemon. I think a lot more people would be willing to try different things, right? Break the mold a little more. I think that there's some systems that are a little antiquated that I think are barriers for entry in regards to competitive. But this goes to say, I actually really like, this is a huge boost in quality from watching him. I think it was on a laptop during Sun and Moon era. And this is a very high quality production. I'm really digging this.
Because these Pokemon are so iconic, I thought it could be really fun to rank them, and that's what I did. And if you get mad at me about what is or isn't considered a pseudo-legendary Pokemon, just keep in mind that I'm not the one who makes the rules. These are generally agreed upon terms. So yeah, if you're mad that Haxorus or Kingdra isn't on here, I'm sorry, but I don't make the rules. Take it up with the big guy. Okay, coming in at number 10 is Kommo-o. Now, before you get mad at me, if you're somebody who loves Kommo-o, just keep in mind that I'm ranking these Pokemon strictly on how good they are competitively, not how worthy they are of getting into heaven. Competitively, Kommo-o is probably the worst Pokemon on our list.
I know people have tried to use Kommo-o, but he's just not there, if that makes sense. There's just better options, right? Dragon fighting as well. It's a super offensive typing. Oh my god, I have to break out the numbers. I have to break out the numbers, chat. I gotta go to Pokemon DB. Pokemon DB, Kommo-o. What is your stat block? Yes, this was so it's actually got a decent amount of speed at 85, special defense 105, special attack 100, 75 HP kind of hurts in terms of type effectiveness. Ice 2 times, Psychic, Flying 2 times, Dragon 2 times, Fairy 2 times. However, Fairy is just such a good typing. I mean, all Dragon types realistically took a hit as soon as Gen 6 came out, right? X and Y era. So,
a fighting and dragon type that was introduced as Sun and Moon's pseudo-legendary Pokemon. Now, fighting and dragon is not great typing because although fighting is good to hit steel type Pokemon that would resist dragon type moves, both fighting and dragon are weak to fairy type attacks. And so even the thought of some fairy dust could knock Kommo-o right over. Now,
this is why if you're weak to Earthquake in competitive Pokemon, if you're weak to ground, your viability just tanks. Now, you can justify yourself and say having something like Levitate, right? Like Gengar having Levitate, which give Gengar Levitate back, please. That's gonna be a hot take. There's gonna be a lot of competitive players who are like, please don't give Gengar Levitate back. There's gonna be a lot of players. But like, notice as soon as Gengar doesn't, because Gengar inherently is weak to ground types. It's the Levitate that makes it immune. But once Gengar is suddenly weak to things like Earthquake, suddenly it has an issue. And that has to go with in terms of just how games and metas evolve, where if you have something that is just seeing play, right? So in Yu-Gi-Oh, right? If you have a very tribute heavy deck, but the meta is inherently just like, nah, we lock people out of tribute summons, suddenly monarchs become less viable, right? If you're playing Pokemon and the meta is, you have your Fire, Water, Grass, Fairy, Steel, Dragon cores, right? Let's say you have Zacian Crown running around. You have things like Mega Rayquaza running around, right? I'm sorry. I know Rayquaza is the technical pronunciation. I do say Rayquaza. I apologize about that. My brain is not going to change how it says it. I mean, and things are just weak to that. Like, you're going to run into issues if bulky water types is the name of the game. And maybe ice types aren't the play. You have ice types which are overwhelmingly aggressive. Like, their play style is along Weavile, right? They want to be aggressive because they don't have that defensive typing. So if you have an ice type who is supposed to be bulky, it doesn't necessarily work, right? You have to take things as they stand. I like that he is pointing this out.
I said earlier that not all the Pokemon on this list were bad, and that's true of Kommo-o. Kommo-o actually, when it was first introduced, was given a signature Z move, which, as far as I can remember, was the only Z move that could hit multiple targets. Not only
is there really a copyright issue with Z moves? Really? Even though it's gameplay. That's fascinating to me, actually.
The Z move hit multiple targets and do a ton of damage. It also gave Kommo-o a pretty meaningful stat boost in every single one of its stats. If you could buy Kommo-o a turn to set up and keep it away from fairy type Pokemon, this Z move could just like turn Kommo-o into a complete monster. Now, on top of having a signature Z move, Kommo-o actually has 2 signature attacks. Clanging Scales is the one that was most popular back in Sun and Moon because it hits both opposing Pokemon, and that's pretty valuable, although it does lower Kommo-o's defense stat by 1. So kind of like a much worse version of its Z move, but it also has the move Clangorous Soul, which gives up 1/3 of its HP and then gives it a stat boost in every single stat. So again, kind of a worse version of its Z move. Kommo-o was used a little bit back in Sun and Moon because of the strength of this Z move and just how powerful it was to get a Pokemon that could boost all of its stats, but it never really took off because like the typing is awkward, and like the weakness to fairy type Pokemon, especially when the Tapu Pokemon were like,
I was about to say, the Tapus all being fairies, you could really run all 4 of them on a team
everywhere, and we're all fairy type, was a bit much for Kommo-o. Even though this was like an established strategy with Kommo-o, it didn't see all that much usage. Like, it was always kind of something you had to be aware of. And actually, there's a team that I almost brought to the World Championships centered around Perish Song in 2018 with Kommo-o because it has the soundproof ability, which is one of the only ways to block Perish Song, but I never got the chance to use it. But yeah, basically Kommo-o, although it was a main contender and the strategies you had to be aware of, it wasn't a very popular one. And after Sun and Moon, Z moves went away. And so I kind of thought Kommo-o would never be good again. However, it does actually benefit a lot from terrestrialization because its defensive typing is so bad. And that's part of the reason why earlier this season, Kommo-o actually went on to win a regional. It didn't use any of its signature moves. Instead, it used a combination of Iron Defense, which raises the user's defense by 2 stages, effectively doubling it, and Body Press, which does more damage the higher the user's defense stat is. So whereas Kommo-o had been kind of this like offensive, fast and frail sweeper before, now it was this defensive tank that could also output huge damage. What made Kommo-o,
I mean, realistically, right? Once again, if we go back to its stat block, right? Like, I mean, it has defenses. Its HP is the issue. Just throw 252 into the HP stat, right? Get those IVs, get those EVs in that HP stat. 125 defense, along with a special of 105. Like, sure, okay, but what else? What about its speed of 85? Have you considered running something with Tailwind? Have you considered something that allows it to actually function? I'm also biased. I run Tailwind Whimsicott. I'm very familiar with me getting divorced with Tornadus Therian players. We look at each other and we figure out who goes first in that Frankster battle.
Unique when it was used with Body Press is that because Kommo-o is a fighting type, Body Press becomes 50% stronger than it otherwise would. So a Pokemon like Kommo-o using Body Press at 2 stages of increased defense is the equivalent of a non-fighting type Pokemon using Body Press with 4 stages of increased defense. So it's a pretty major multiplier. Anyway, Kommo-o wasn't bad, but it is the worst of the pseudo-legendary Pokemon, which is actually a pretty good segue into number 9 because the number 9 worst pseudo-legendary Pokemon, well, it's not worst.
It's before we get into that. I think, yeah, no, I think everything he says tracks. I think everything he said is pretty agreeable. I like that he showcased the introduction, like that he showcased the strengths, like they showcase weaknesses. I like that this is a showcase of as Pokemon moves on in generations and mechanics go to the wayside, we end up seeing Pokemon who were once good kind of fail in usage. But it also shows the innovative of not just the VGC scene, but the competitive Pokemon scene for being able to try new things. I mean, we still have people playing legacy formats. We still have people playing RBY format, 25 years later? And people, pick up things like Moltres or things like Nidoqueen that haven't been used before. It also gets into the, in retrospective argument, right? We're sure we know things like RBY are inherently different because of how, the physical special split wasn't there, because of how special was one stat instead of special attack, special defense, right? Like we have things there. But it's interesting having hindsight. It's like playing GOAT format in Yu-Gi-Oh! Going back and how we play Solemn Judgment today is not how we played Solemn Judgment like 15 years ago, right? Like playing we play, and so that's why it's contested in GOAT format. And I've explained this before because we're playing it as if we're playing modern Yu-Gi-Oh! When we're not playing it as if we were playing retro Yu-Gi-Oh! So we have that hindsight making it a fairly controversial entry into that retro format. But yeah, like losing Z moves definitely hurts a lot of things. Certain buffs, are definitely warranted. Go look at Mimikyu. Mimikyu losing its disguise that it had in Gen 7 because, oh my god, being able to focus sash on top of disguise was disgusting. Oh god. But things like that are, for healthy game balance, they cut it down. Like, yeah, you're not gonna be able to use focus sash, because your disguise is gonna pop and you're gonna lose some HP. Some balances are warranted. But I like seeing innovation like this. I like seeing people take Pokemon who just fall to the wayside and they're able to do some work with it. I think that was really cool.
Just number 9 pseudo-legendary Pokemon is Goodra, and most recently Hisuian Goodra was using Iron Defense and Body Press as well. Right. Goodra has better typing. Well, okay, hang on. There's two Goodras. There's the original Goodra, which is the regular pure dragon form, and then there's Hisuian Goodra, which is dragon and steel type. I'm grouping these two together because they neither was especially remarkable on its own, and I thought it would be weird to have regular Goodra at one placement and then Hisuian Goodra at a different placement. Right. So just bear with me. I'm going to talk about them together. Goodra and Hisuian Goodra share some things in common. They're both dragon type and they're both extremely specially defensive. Goodra was introduced in X and Y, and immediately it was clear that this was a Pokemon that was going to be a little bit difficult to use just because you have so many options when using it. Goodra has a really deep move pool. It learns so many different coverage moves, and what's interesting is that it learns both physical and special attacks. On top of that, it has a couple interesting abilities. Sap Sipper makes it immune to grass type moves. Gooey lowers the speed of any Pokemon that makes contact with it with an attack. So if you hit it with Fake Out or Mega Punch or whatever, your speed will get lowered. And Hydration will cure all status conditions in the rain. So you can do stuff like run Rest Goodra and then get all your health back and then get woken up immediately. Goodra was normally this incredible special tank because it was so specially bulky, especially if you gave it the Assault Vest, which also let it use more offensive moves with less of a drawback. And as a special tank with great coverage, it was really excellent if it was hitting things for super effective damage, but it wasn't that strong. So even when it was hitting Pokemon for super effective damage, it was rarely picking up one-hit KOs. That being
looking at base Goodra, that 150 special defense is really dummy thick. You are going to run into some speed tier issues. You're hitting a speed of 80, which is inherently slower than Kommo-o, which we just covered. HP of 90, chunk some into HP there. Special defense, you probably don't even need to raise it in regards to, you could probably put your extra 4 to 6. Technically, it's 6 as for a number standpoint, right? 252, 2526, right? But it's every 4 points of EVs that actually gives a stat point, so it's your extra 4, let's be honest. Your extra 4 into special defense, unless you really want to bulk that up. Your defense of 70 kind of hurts. You could hypothetically just go ham into HP and special defense. Maybe throw a little bit of bulk into defense. It just depends what you're trying to shore up for, right? But having a special attack of 110 isn't bad by any means. You are going to run into stab issues, same type attack bonus because you are just strictly dragon type. Hisuian Goodra, I actually have not played through Legends Arceus still. I keep forgetting it didn't come out last year. It's been a couple years at this point. Getting the steel type, excellent stab. It looks like its HP went down a little bit, but attack is 100, defense is 100, special attack 110 still. Speed of 60, so you're definitely hurting a little bit more there. You're what? That's Dracovish tier, Arctovish tier, 55-ish, 60. So you're a little slower, but if you can escort the payload Overwatch style, I feel like you're in for a really fun time.
Said you often didn't rely on Goodra to get one-hit KOs. It was mostly there to stick around, consistently output damage, and just be really annoying to get rid of. Like Kommo-o, Goodra was always kind of a niche pick back in the day, but it never really had a central strategy like Kommo-o did, though it did do pretty well across the years, always popping up as this like really specially tanky Pokemon, it was especially good at beating rain-based teams, because rain teams obviously rely on water type attacks, and then Goodra not only is incredibly specially bulky, but it also resists water type moves. Hisuian Goodra,
it almost feels like it's just a hyper specialized Swiss Army knife, right? Like you have moves across both the physical and special spectrum. You have good abilities, like its abilities are for all intents and purposes just good stuffs, right? Where you got hydration, sap sipper, gooey, shell armor, even on Hisuian Goodra, right? Like you have stuff, you have general good stuff on this Pokemon. I think it really scales up depending on what the trainer is doing, right?
A more recent addition, and so it's a bit harder to talk about. I would say that it's probably pretty widely agreed upon as being better than regular Goodra. Steel and Dragon typing is much better. You aren't weak to Fairy type Pokemon, and Steel is just the best defensive type in the game, so it gives you a ton of resistances that you wouldn't otherwise have. And it also has the ability Shell Armor, which prevents all critical hits. This ability isn't normally thought to be all that good, but it actually works very well on Hisuian Goodra, because the main set that Hisuian Goodra runs is Iron Defense and Body Press, just like Kommo-o. And although Kommo-o can do a lot more damage with its fighting typing, Hisuian Goodra is a lot more defensive, and so it isn't always forced to terrestrialize or run into Fairy type Pokemon. And because Hisuian Goodra is a Steel type, it actually matches up pretty well into the Fairy type Pokemon that would otherwise counter it. Specifically, Fluttermane was normally a pretty good counter to Pokemon that relied on Body Press because it's a Ghost type and immune to fighting type moves, but Hisuian Goodra can KO it in a single hit. And actually, Hisuian Goodra really appreciates the Shell Armor ability, turning off critical hits, because critical hits ignore all of your own stat boosts. So even if Hisuian Goodra has maxed out its defense boosts, like it doesn't matter so much if it just gets critical hit, because it ignores all of them. Shell Armor basically eliminates the possibility that you'll just lose to a random critical hit when you would otherwise win. Now, it is worth noting that although Hisuian Goodra has kind of a more standard set, and it did see a little bit of play, it didn't do super well, and it never really took off. It's just that, like, these kind of passive, slow setup strategies don't tend to perform that well. And actually, the reason why Kommo-o was able to make use of it is because of the fact that it does so much more damage thanks to Body Press, and it was a little bit less prepared for at the time. Like, it was just more under the radar than Hisuian Goodra was. That being said, because Goodra's been good for multiple years, and especially like because it has two forms, each of which that were threatening in their own right, I felt like it deserved a slightly higher placement on the list than Kommo-o. Which brings us to—
No, I can agree with that. I think it's interesting to see usage on it. And it's interesting to hear from the modern metagame standpoint about how it turns off like Urshifu Dark, right? Urshifu Single Strike. I think that's actually really cool. I really hadn't considered Goodra. I actually have a problem with building my teams hyper offensive rather than any sort of bulk. So I'll definitely run into issues where, you know, it's like, well, I literally can't survive this, as I'm running things like Zacian Crowned, Mega Rayquaza, running things like Whimsicott, right? I mean, I'm very, very offensive. I mean, Choice Specs, Water Spout, Kyogre, right? But the moment you're able to like chip that Kyogre in any capacity, it's like you're just done. You're out. So it's interesting to see. I'll have to definitely give Frozen Darkest another go, get to endgame, and I'll have to actually try and get my Hisuian Goodras, because I figure they'll be interesting to have in terms of just like usage, right? I think they'll be interesting to have.
Our number 8 slot, which is also the most recent pseudo-legendary Pokemon, Baxcalibur. Baxcalibur is a dragon and ice type Pokemon that is honestly pretty good. Like, we're already at the point where the Pokemon on the list are pretty good. Baxcalibur won an international championships, which is the second highest level of tournament, in its debut season. So it's by—
I see that Dragon Scimitar. I see that. Don't think I didn't notice your RuneScape reference.
no means bad. Excalibur is an ice and dragon type, which isn't great typing, but it also isn't terrible. Ice is a really good offensive type, and dragon is also a really good offensive type. And although like they both struggle to hit steel type Pokemon, the combination is still overall solid. What makes Excalibur strong is it has great stats. It's very tanky, but it also hits very hard. It has a good ability, actually a really good ability that gives it an attack boost if it ever gets hit with a fire type move, and prevents it from being burnt, which is a really powerful combination. And
I mean, moves like Heat Wave do exist, do they not? Does Zapdos not pack Heat Wave on occasion? I think it's actually a really popular move for Zapdos to have that double spread. Isn't it like 30% burn chance too? That spread fire type move. Sure, you're not getting like you're not getting stab on Zapdos, but like you're hitting like, I mean, Charizard can run it too, I guess, right? Like it's the spread and the burn chance that you're running at and trying to hit things that are weak to fire.
I think it's a really good move pool, including a signature move, which is just phenomenal. Excalibur's signature move is Glaive Rush, which I called Glaive Rush when Scarlet and Violet first came out, and then I got a lot of really angry comments, but I believe it's Glaive Rush. If it is Glaive Rush and I was just gaslit, I'm going to be upset. But
no, it's Glaive, like an actual like Glaive the weapon, right? GLAIVE images. Yeah, it's just it's this. It's a glaive. Like this is what unironically run SCA, right? Or did run an SCA. I run in circles that like medieval weapons, right? So this is what this is referencing specifically. It's a glaive. That being said, I mean, I'm not a nutter over pronunciation, right? Like pronounce it Rayquaza, pronounce it Rayquaza, like pronounce it whatever. Just don't be weird about it, right? As it turns out, don't be weird. That's it. We've done it. We've solved the internet.
This is a very powerful dragon type move, but it has a pretty major drawback, which is that until the next time Baxcalibur attacks, it'll take double damage. Now, taking double damage is obviously a death sentence, but there is a very easy way around this, which is that if Baxcalibur uses the move Protect, a move that blocks all damage, it just turns off this effect immediately. Like, it's just until the next time Baxcalibur moves, even if it doesn't go for any damage. And
it's just better Slay King. It's that you can still do a move the follow-up turn if you need to. You're not loafing around. You're literally playing this like you're playing Slacking with the truant turn being Protect. I love it.
Excalibur also gets the priority attack Ice Shard, which will move before most other attacks and remove the Glaive Rush effect. And so actually this downside ends up being really manageable, and it actually isn't that big a deal, especially compared to other downsides like a ton of recoil damage or missing your move, or I don't know, like having to watch a really lame animation. This signature move also takes advantage of Excalibur's more middling speed stat, where it actually doesn't want to attack before other Pokemon. It wants to be attacking towards the end of the turn so that any following attacks it takes aren't doubled because of the Glaive Rush effect.
I forget how Iron bundles, how fast it is. That's disgusting.
I'd say that Excalibur's biggest weakness is its typing, which is why it's pretty good that it was added in Scarlet and Violet, where Pokemon can change their type defensively. This is a big part of the reason why Excalibur was a main threat for most of the first year of Scarlet and Violet. I think Excalibur is a really cool Pokemon, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it do well again in the future. And the fact that it's not even like on the bottom of the list when it's only been out for a little over a year at this point, I think speaks to the fact that it has a lot going for it. Okay,
I mean, it's pretty cool. Don't get me wrong. I like the obvious Japanese lizard kaiju that begins with a G. Copyright. I love that there seems to be that inspiration or influence. I actually wonder if, like, was it Toho Studios owns it? I wonder if Toho actually issued a lawsuit over that, because they probably could. Like, Japanese lawsuits are the Japanese legal system is interesting. That is one of those subjects that I like diving into, because it's like, oh, it's so interesting over there. No, I can agree with that. I think that it's very good. I think that it is a very good Pokemon already. And its usage, I mean, speaks to itself. I know people weren't using Thermal Exchange. I'm just like, why would you ever not use Thermal Exchange? Like, unless you're trying to go for something super specific, Thermal Exchange just seems like best in slot.
At number 7, I think this is the first one where people are actually going to start getting mad at me, but I really think this is the fairest placement I could give to this Pokemon. Number 7 is Dragonite. I don't even want to think about the comments, honestly.
No, I think that's fair. Like, what ability-wise, what are you running? Like, oh, I know it gets multi-scale, and that's the big one. Dragonite, DB. What are you running? Inner Focus? No, you're clearly running multi-scale. Congrats. Like, I don't know. I think this is like a pretty fair placement.
But hear me out, okay? Dragonite right now is good, or at least it was really good for the first year of Scarlet and Violet. It benefited a lot from the changes to its ability Inner Focus, which now prevent its attack from being lowered by the ability Intimidate, which is very common in competitive Pokemon. And it also benefits a lot from Terastallization, being able to remove its quadruple weakness to Ice, its weakness to Fairy, its weakness to Rock, and get a damage boost on its move Extreme Speed. Inner Focus preventing both Intimidate and Flinching, and then Terra Normal boosting its damage output. If you give it a damage boosting item like Choice Band, you can very quickly run into issues where Dragonite just can KO any Pokemon before they can move, especially.
I mean, yeah, the one detriment is you have to make sure you're taking care of Fluttermane or any fast ghost types, right? I mean, ultimately, yeah, if that is your thing, like that's your one progress gate. Solve the progress gate. Yeah, grats, you're firing off stab extreme speeds left and right.
You start adding in additional damage multipliers like Helping Hand or Chen Pao's Sword of Ruin. Basically, if none of that makes any sense to you and you just clicked on this video because you want to hear about pseudo-legendary Pokemon, what you need to know is that Dragonite has the ability right now to go very fast and hit very hard with very little counterplay, which is very good. But what you have to understand is that Dragonite's been around for a while, and this is the first time that it has really ever been good. I've been playing competitive Pokemon for over a decade, and like I tried Dragonite at times, and there were a handful of players who believed in it, but like there's not really a lot of results to back it up. To give you an idea of just how little Dragonite was used and how little impact it had, the entire history of Dragonite's like competitive achievements over the years since like the early earliest one is 2012 on the results page that isn't perfect, but keeps track of most results, is less people and like less Dragonite being used than any tournament where it is used in Scarlet and Violet. So the reason.
So I also want to bring it to the forefront. You could have a Dragonite with multiscale. You know what you could also have, especially in older formats, you could have a Salamence with Intimidate. Salamence in Oraz could also Mega Evolve. Like it's not saying that it's necessarily bad, right? It's bringing to the forefront that there are just better options sometimes, and that's fine. You are allowed in games to have your bad option. You're allowed to have your mid-tier options. You're allowed to have your A-tier options. Your S-tier broken best in slot options, right? Generally, those should most likely be avoided unless they're best in slot for a specific thing, right? I think we can kind of agree with that in terms of a game design standpoint. But like, yeah. I mean, sure, Dragonite big, it Durgan, it do Durgan things, right? It's okay. It functions. It can do, but there's potentially just better options out there, especially when the Dragon type got more and more inundated with members, right? Going into Gen 4, Gen 5 especially, right? Like, yeah, it functions, it works. You can do things with it, especially Scarlet and Violet, like he's saying with the Terra typing, Terra type normal, being able to wombo combo with extreme speed and stuff like that. I think that relegates himself to a gimmick, though. I think that outside of that gimmick, it will start to fall apart, right? Or if that is not a valid avenue of play, doesn't necessarily stand on its own 2 feet, or will something just be better? That's what we have to ask. Would Garchomp be better in a situation like this? Probably so. Probably Garchomp probably has some use case, or at least more utility, right? And that's really what it comes down to. Like, I get it. It's the internet, and people are going to and screech, and there's absolutely good criticism on that. Absolutely, like there's multiple angles you can come from, especially if it's from the actual like creative critique side, like actual like relevant critiques and criticisms. Like, I don't know. It's odd. I have to dance through that line of like calling something bad is not necessarily an attack. It's like it could just not be the right tool for the situation, or it might not be a good tool for any situation. But however, if things do go right, if it gets certain things, get certain tools, it could do things.
That it's not higher is that it basically was never good before. In fact, like you would maybe use it as a special attacker, but yeah, like it just really wasn't very good. Like the thing is that there are better, spoiler alert, there are better dragon and flying type Pokemon in the game, and Dragonite, like but without inner focus being really strong and without the ability to change its type, it just wasn't strong enough. The biggest issue with Dragonite is that its stats are distributed in a really awkward way, where it's not super fast, and it's also like bulky enough, but not like crazy levels of bulk. And then its offenses aren't so high because they're pretty balanced. Like Dragonite has both a lot of attack and a lot of special attack, and that actually works against it because it would rather have one of those stat points be elsewhere. That being said, in Scarlet and Violet, it did very well. It was one of the top threats. It won multiple tournaments. It's a very strong Pokemon, and it was terrifying to deal with. Like going up against Choice Band, Terra Normal, Extreme Speed, Sword of Ruin boosted Dragonite, like even Pokemon you think would be okay were just dropping. And I think that's really cool. I think it's actually a really cool redemption arc for a Pokemon that has been around since the beginning. For me, the big question is there any way that Dragonite's going to be able to keep up in the future once Terrestrialization is, inevitably removed, assuming that it is removed? We don't know anything about the next Pokemon games at the moment, but Dragonite, like, it benefits so much from Terrestrialization that it's hard for me to imagine it like being nearly as good when Terrestrialization goes away. So that's the reason that it's not higher, but I also thought it deserved to be above the Pokemon below it because it was like a main threat in a way that none of the Pokemon that were below it ever were. Like Dragonite was at the forefront of a lot of popular competitive teams, and for that reason I think it deserves the number 7 slot on our list. There are a lot.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. I think it's a really cool redemption arc, right? Like, I think that it's interesting to have a Pokemon who's been around since the beginning. And honestly, the stat block almost treats it like a Swiss Army knife, right? Being able to have decent speed, but being able to hit physically, being able to hit specially, being able to have some sort of middling defenses. Like, I think it's very thematic for a bulky, legendary, quote-unquote, dragon type all the way back in RBY, all the way back since Gen 1, right? I mean, Dragonite's been with us since effectively the beginning. Even in the anime, right? Bill's Lighthouse was like episode 10 of Indigo League or something like that. We see Dragonite, just the giant Dragonite. Like, a very popular fan favorite Pokemon. I totally get it.
the dragon type Pokemon on this list, but the number 6 slot goes to a Pokemon that sounds the most like Dragonite, Dragapult. I really love Dragapult. This is Sword and Shield pseudo-legendary Pokemon, and it's actually really good. When it first released, Dragapult was one of the main threats in Sword and Shield because of how fast it was. Dragapult's really fast and hits really hard, and just like Dragonite, its ability prevents its attack stat from being lowered, although it's kind of...
Dude, there were people who ran Infiltrator. I disagreed with Infiltrator. I've never run Infiltrator Dragapult. I think Clear Body was the correct choice.
Even better because it's the Clear Body
VGC
ability, which prevents not just attack drops, but all kinds of stat drops. On top of that, Dragapult is a Dragon and Ghost typing, which apart from just being really cool typing, also makes it immune to the move Fake Out, which normally is used to make a Pokemon flinch. It's especially effective against faster Pokemon. So Dragapult has a lot of slow down tools in its kit. Dragapult was quickly identified as like one of the main Dynamax attackers. The main max moves it used were the Ghost Max move and the Dragon Max move, because those were also getting a damage boost by matching Dragapult's typing, and those two moves could be used defensively or offensively, with the Dragon 1 lowering the attack stat of the opponent, increasing Dragapult's bulk, and the Ghost 1 lowering the defense stat of both opponents, which would allow Dragapult or its partner's next attack to do even more damage. So Sword and Shield released, and Dragapult was used as this big attacker with maybe Life Orb or Helping Hand and like all these ways to boost its damage, and it was really hard to deal with. And we kind of thought that Dragapult was a one-trick pony. But what's cool about Dragapult is that even though it was obviously designed to be this fast, frail, strong physical attacker, people found other ways of using Dragapult as well. My personal favorite way to use Dragapult was as this really annoying support Pokemon, where although it wasn't naturally so tanky, because it was so fast, it could use these really disruptive moves before the opponent attacked, and actually end up sticking around a lot longer than you might expect, and still take advantage of the fact that a lot of the common counterplay against faster Pokemon didn't work on it.
Wasn't that actually a huge point of contention during Sword and Shield format, was that Ally Switch was everywhere? A lot of people didn't like it, to which the response is just play better 5-head, right? Like I remember there being a lot of discourse, a lot of negative discourse around Ally Switch and the prevalence of Ally Switch, which just comes down to just make correct predictions. Play better. I don't know. It's one of those I vaguely remember, and I vaguely remember the back and forth on it.
This kind of support of Dragapult to win the Players Cup 2, which was one of the only tournaments that took place during the pandemic. And I used moves like Will-O-Wisp to burn opponents, Light Screen to raise my team's special defense, and then Breaking Swipe to lower my opponent's attack even further, as well as Surf to boost my Colossal's steam engine and get that online to basically win the tournament. It was a really, really valuable Pokemon, and in the finals, it shut down a Regigigas, which was giving me a ton of problems. So when Sword and Shield ended and Dynamax was removed, myself and many other people thought that that was the end of Dragapult. Thought that, it was really good with Dynamax, but like without Dynamax, how good could it be? And then it won the second biggest tournament of the entire year of Scarlet and Violet's first competitive season. Dragapult's main weakness.
I'm sorry, what was that team? That I know I didn't see that correctly. Is that a Fluttermane, a Chien Pao, and a... Was this back when Dodonzo worked without Tatsugiri? Why is the Dodonzo here? Ting Lu and an Iron Hands. Dude, what is that team, Alex Gomez? You absolute legend. I absolutely love this team. That is some hyper aggression. My hat's off to you. Yeah, didn't Dodonzo work with like Walking Wake for a period of time? I think they patched it, right? Like there was a certain criteria that you could that allowed certain other things to work with. I don't know. Someone will be able to enlighten me in the comments, because I barely remember the interaction. I've honestly not been playing VGC or anything for the entirety of Scarlet and Violet. Part of it's the frame rate. Part of the frame rate just it makes my head hurt. Like I physically want to play, but it can make me just sick to play because of the frame rate, dropping frames, field of view, stuff like that. So I'm hoping the Switch 2 is just, it's going to be easier. Just give me a consistent 30 or something. Like please. I would love 60, but if that's too much, I mean, I'm willing to take what I can get. The spirit wants to play, but man, the time investment and the body just can't justify it, and it really makes me sad.
Dragapult's main weakness is the fact that it doesn't have a reliable good ghost type attack. It has Phantom Force, but that takes 2 turns, and oftentimes you don't want to wait for your damage, you just want it now. And so the Dragapult that won North American Internationals was using Terra Ghost, Terra Blast to kind of work as like a pseudo max Phantasm, like a pseudo max ghost move. And it's really strong. It actually was kind of a replacement for Dragonite, where although it didn't have the priority of extreme speed, which normally moves before other moves, Dragon Bolt was so fast that it didn't care so much about it. And with like a Choice Band and Chen-Pao Sword of Ruin, similar to Dragonite, it was just able to do such ridiculous damage, even I think more than Dragonite could do. And so yeah, it was chosen as this really powerful physical attacker that, although pretty frail, if it hit something, was just dropping. And then Dragapult almost won the World Championships, despite that using a different rule set with more Pokemon available with the same role with Chen-Pao and doing all this like damage. And so it's a Pokemon that I think is really, really impressive. It's only been around for a generation and a half, but it has such great results that the only reason it's not higher on the list is because there are a lot of really good pseudo-legendary Pokemon. Okay, coming in at number 5.
So I'm actually surprised he didn't talk about Dragon Dart's smart targeting. We've talked about it a few times in some videos. I think some False Fight gaming reactions. Dragon Darts it fires the little babies out of its head, the little helmet. Which I'm really sad they removed that animation from Scarlet and Violet because it was in Sword and Shield. And they're just like, nah, we're not gonna make it. Which is really sad for me. But what I can say is it does smart target. So if you're in VGC, right, and you're facing down 2 Pokemon, right? If you do Dragon Darts normally, it'll hit one opponent and it'll hit the other opponent. Hit opponent A, opponent B. If opponent A, say, uses Protect, both will go into it'll smart target, so both of the Dragon Darts go into opponent B. So I think it's interesting to point out that he doesn't really have that reliable ghost attack, and that's why we get into Terra Ghost, Terra Blast being used. But one thing to discuss when using Dragapult is absolutely that smart targeting capability with Dragon Darts. I think that is a huge talking point.
If we have yet another dragon, has every Pokemon been? Oh my god, every Pokemon's been a dragon so far. Wait, they're all dragons except for 2. I should stop talking about dragons. Anyway, coming in at number 5, a personal favorite Pokemon of mine, Hydreigon. This dark and dragon type Pokemon is number 5 on our list, and I want you to keep that in mind because Hydreigon won the World Championships twice. That's the quality of Pokemon we're talking about here, where a Pokemon that won the World Championships twice is 5th on the list. Hydreigon
depends on those World Championships are won, because as soon as Fairy typing came out, like Hydreigon, it really took a hit. Like Fairy type, the advent of Fairy type really hurt.
Is a dark and dragon type Pokemon that was introduced as Generation 5's pseudo-legendary Pokemon, and it's really strong. It was especially really strong back in Generation 5 when it first released because Fairy type Pokemon weren't in the game and Dragon was the best type in the game. Hydreigon's a Pokemon that is extremely scary because it just does so much damage. It's not only that it has a high special attack stat, it also just has really great moves and good move coverage. Draco Meteor is its main dragon type attack that does a ton of damage, but it also has great moves like Dark Pulse, Earth Power, and Flamethrower, which can be used for coverage or to hit Pokemon that otherwise would resist Draco Meteor. And despite being just overwhelmingly powerful, Hydreigon's actually kind of hard to get rid of. Ignoring Fairy type Pokemon, which is a big ignore, but bear with me for a second, pretend we're back in Generation 5. There aren't that many types that Hydreigon is weak to, and it also has 2 immunities to flying with ground with its levitate ability, and psychic with its dark typing. Plus Dragon and Dark
Hydreigon's stat block makes it incredibly hard to deal with. So like, let's say we're going back to Gen 5 really quick, right? And this is why the advent of Fairy typing, in my opinion, really kind of came about, because Hydreigon, I always call it Hydreigon. It's not the correct pronunciation, I'm aware. Like, it has 98 speed. It is screaming. It is 4 points less than Garchomp. Special defensive 90, defensive 90, sure. It's still pretty bulky. HP 92. All 3 of those working in tandem with each other leads to an insane amount of bulk. 105 attack and 125 special. Like this thing goes hard. It also has levitate. Like, when we already explained that, like, levitate giving an immunity to ground type with Earthquake, I would argue the premier ground type spread move in VGC. Just giving an immunity to that is already just absolutely nutty.
Are both pretty decent defensive typings because they give you a number of resistances without like that many weaknesses. Of course, it's not a perfect spread. Again, ignoring Fairy type Pokemon, which is a whole thing, but it's actually not as bad as you might think. And Hydreigon has really respectable base stats in its bulk, where it's not going to be able to take these huge, mega powerful attacks or even most super effective attacks that are relatively strong, but it'll often survive 2, maybe even 3 hits if the moves aren't that powerful or if it resists them. And like, that's a big deal when the Pokemon can stay on the field and just do tons of damage every single turn. When Hydreigon first released with Black and White, it was just a menace. Like, it was so good, and there just weren't that many Pokemon that could handle it. I actually wouldn't be shocked if you told me that Hydreigon was one of the Pokemon that put pressure on Game Freak to invent the fairy type in the first place, because it was just so good. Now, we do have to talk about fairy type Pokemon because that has been, I won't even say an undercurrent, that's been kind of the subtext this whole time, right? And the thing about fairy type Pokemon is not only is Hydreigon quadruple weak to them, that any fairy type move will definitely knock it out, but also both of its types are resisted or worse immune by fairy type Pokemon. Fairy type Pokemon resist and are immune to Dragon and Dark, like plain and simple. And so when fairy type Pokemon are introduced, many people, myself included, thought that that was the end of Hydreigon, but it still did really well. It was one of the top Pokemon the very first year of X and Y when fairy Pokemon had been introduced. It actually won the US National Championships. It placed third at the World Championships. It had a number of great performances. And even the following year, when more Pokemon were added in, including like better fairy type Pokemon, it didn't stop Hydreigon. It was still like one of the main Pokemon and did really well throughout the year. It actually even managed to top cut the World Championships that following year in 2015, which is especially impressive because Pokemon were really strong back then. We weren't really seeing a lot of Hydreigon at the time, but it still had a niche and took advantage of all the things that it has going for it and made it all the way to the final stage of the World Championships. Since then, Hydreigon's performance has kind of been in and out. Like, it saw a little play at the beginning of generations 8 and 9, but it's not like a Pokemon that it's so easy for it to keep up. It did have some play at the beginning of Scarlet and Violet in large part because it could finally change its typing, but it didn't have that many incredible performances, I would say. And so it's certainly not a bad Pokemon anymore, but it doesn't have that kind of insane edge that it once did before fairy type Pokemon existed. That being said, it had such a strong start, and the fact that even adding the fairy type into the game wasn't enough to immediately just send it into the ground makes me feel like it's by far one of the best pseudo-legendary Pokemon of all time, earning its spot at 5th place. Which brings us to the number 4 slot on our list. But before we talk,
did we get into, I think I missed it. I missed the years about it, when it was world champion. I'm assuming Gen 5. Probably Gen 5, Gen 6, if I had to assume, right? Like from the information. I definitely missed that. So I apologize about that. No, I agree with that. I agree putting it number 5 in regards to, especially not being outright just canned with the advent of fairy typing in Gen 6. Like it is still an option. It is still a very valid option to use. Sure, you have to solve the fairy type conundrum, don't get me wrong, or you have to have the answer for the fairy type. However, I mean, it still performs to this day. It's honestly kind of wild to see.
About that, just a quick interruption. If you don't mind, it'd be great if you checked to see if you were subscribed. My team and I work really hard to make these videos, and feedback that I get surprisingly often is that people are watching the channel, but like they think that they're subscribed, but actually aren't. And I just wanted to say something now so that if that's you and you think you're subscribed, maybe just double check. If you're enjoying the content and don't want to subscribe, that's totally cool too. I just wanted to say something because it really does help me out a lot. And like, I'm very grateful to you all for watching. And if you enjoy the content, it is a really great way to support not only myself, but all the people who work on the channel. I don't know if you all know this, but there's like probably 20 people in total who work on this channel. So yeah, I'm just trying to do right by me and do right by them and do right by you all. Anyway, let's talk about.
So I don't know why, because I saw the statistics, right? It says not real statistics. I don't know why. I guess I'm missing context there on why you just wouldn't include the actual statistics. I know a lot of YouTubers do. It could also be a preference thing. It could just be a placeholder disclosing these are not actual statistics, but like this is, hey, generally how this works, where there's a lot of people who aren't subscribed. I don't know. That one's interesting. This is also to showcase why I treat reaction content with as it has my full attention, right? And I try to be as transformative as possible because, yeah, it's very easy for me to comment, oh, Lamau, Dragonite, Extreme Speed. Nah, it makes a lot of sense, right? When it took how many people, how much time to make a video like this. So I think that's a perfect showcase of why I try to give things my full attention, why I try to be as respectful as possible, why I try my best to be as transformative as possible to show respect to the original content and the original creator as well. I know that Wolfey does end up do reaction content. I mean, he's pretty large PokeTuber, right? It would make sense, right? Terminal Montage probably gave him ability to react to the Pokemon Battle Royale video, right? And like that's fine. That's one of those, like, yeah, it's cool. It's I want to just showcase that you know, not all reaction content can be bad. I definitely tangent a lot, but I want that is a core reason on why, regardless if it's WolfeyVGC, regardless if it's False White Gaming, regardless of Shuan, whoever it is, I try to make sure I show the respect that I can because I feel the original video and the original creator and their team do deserve that respect at minimum.
The number 4 slot on our list, Metagross. Metagross is like a classic Pokemon, right? Like, I don't think anybody dislikes Metagross. It's just so cool. Back when I first started playing competitively in official tournaments back in Generation 5, Metagross was one of the best Pokemon, period. It was incredibly hard to get rid of because it was so bulky and its typing was so good, especially back then because Steel resisted both Dark and Ghost. It was really hard to get Metagross off the field unless you had a really powerful Fire or Ground type Pokemon. And what people would do is they would use Lumberry Metagross to protect it from like burns or sleep, but also confusion because they would use Swagger Cresselia or Swagger Thundurus, Swagger something on their own Metagross, Swagger doubling a Pokemon's attack stat and then confusing them. And then the Lumberry would just cure the confusion. And so you'd get double attack Metagross, who also, by the way, has the Clear Body ability, same as Dragapult, which prevents its stats from being lowered. So yeah, Metagross is a very, very, very strong Pokemon.
It also gets light metal, I think. And there's a percentage of players who, I guess, swear by light metal or they use light metal. Like, there's a clear percentage. I don't understand why. I think people outlined some people were using it for some troll strats and stuff, especially if ability swaps were a thing. It's just, I think Clear Body generally is just the better choice for Metagross. Like, I think it resolves more interactions than something like light metal would.
Back in Generation 5, Metagross was one of the top contenders, especially because that was the year when Dragon-type Pokemon, or the generation, I should say, where Dragon-type Pokemon were so unbelievably powerful. And so you kind of wanted the Steel-type on your team, and Metagross was probably the best Steel-type. Like, there were other options as well, but Metagross was I would say, pretty widely agreed upon as number 1. Metagross's typing is also pretty decent offensively. Like Steel and Psychic just hit a wide cast of Pokemon. Plus it can use moves like Earthquake to hit opposing Steel types. It gets priority in the form of Bullet Punch. It gets a lot of coverage moves like Ice Punch, Hammer Arm. I think it gets Fire Punch and Thunder Punch as well.
In the Earthquake, I appreciate the Animal Crossing sound effect used there. That was a very nice touch.
It's a really versatile Pokemon, and it's not even forced to use that Lumberry strategy that I told you about. You can use items like Assault Vest or Choice Band, or back in the day, you could use normal Gem Explosion if you wanted, though Choice Band was also popular. Yeah, it's just a...
Dude, I miss the gems. Can we bring back the gems, please? Just bring them back. I'd be okay with a hyper powerful format.
Very, very, very good Pokemon. And that's probably the reason why in 2012, it actually won the World Championships. And the following year, in 2013, the final year of Black 2 and White 2 before X and Y, Metagross was also one of the top threats. It was extremely good. It went on to win the US National Championships and have a number of other good performances throughout the year. And then when X and Y came out, they introduced Mega Metagross. Now, Mega Metagross...
I appreciate the correction because I was really wondering, I'm like, why are we showing Auraz? I appreciate the correction. See, and that's it, right? That's it. Like, script is still going, right? It's already recorded. It's more effort to go back and try to either do the reshoot or correct it. That is a relevant correction, right? So sure, I mean, for the listener, right? The which is also valid, right? A valid way of like consuming YouTube content. I think that was an appropriate way to do a correction, right? It's minimalistic. It's still technically the same generation. It's just Auraz versus X and Y. I liked it. I liked how you handled that.
This is a cool Pokemon because I think it was a pretty well-balanced Mega Evolution, which is not something I can say about most of the Mega Evolutions. It was in the good but not broken tier, where like it was extremely strong. It gets a lot faster and a bit stronger because of its ability change to Tough Claws, giving it a damage boost. But it like always felt fair and manageable in a way that like not all the Mega Evolutions did, okay? Anyway, Mega Metagross never won the World Championships, but it did get close a number of times, and I think that's kind of cool. And it also won a number of other tournaments throughout the years. And even once Mega Metagross was in the game, like it wasn't the only way that Metagross saw play. Towards the end of the first year of Sun and Moon's release, people developed this strategy, which was basically Metagross with the weakness policy ability paired with Bulldoze, which would lower the speed stat of any Pokemon that it hit, and it was a ground type move and it was kind of weak, so it didn't do that much damage. The thing is that you would Bulldoze your own Metagross, lower the speed of both your opponents, and then that would act...
I absolutely did this. I did this in Gen 7. Absolutely. I remember this.
Metagross's weakness policy, doubling its attack stat, and because of its Clear Body ability, its speed wouldn't even get lowered. And so you could once again kind of have like this Metagross that was really strong, but this time it was even faster because of the Bulldoze. This strategy wasn't like incredibly broken, but it was used. And it's not like that was the end of Metagross either. It also saw a little play during Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet, though I would say that it didn't have any like crazy finishes in either, at least not that I can remember. Anyway, Metagross is a Pokemon that has had so much longevity, and it has been like usable or good in every single generation, including one time where it was one of the single top threats in the entire game. And so I placed it at number 4 on this list, and you know what? I feel good about that. I feel good about Metagross at number 4, okay? And part of the reason that I feel good about Metagross at number 4 is because our top 3 Pokemon are arguably some of the best Pokemon of all time, period, okay? And that's because
I feel like he's arguing a lot. I mean, I do this a lot too, don't get me wrong, right? Where I'll have people comment in regards to pausing too much, right? Like, well, you're pausing, you're adding way too much commentary. It's like, just go watch the original video, Fivehead, right? Like, I feel at a certain point it becomes a little antagonistic. Like, I don't know. I'm trying to like wrap my head around and rationalize it, right? Like, that's not necessarily a jab at him. It feels like this is becoming a little antagonistic. Like, at the end of the day, if you place Dragonite at 9, sure, cool. Did you justify your reasoning? You know, that makes sense. I may disagree with it, but yeah, that makes sense. I don't know. It's interesting. Like, I think it's done in the appropriate amount where it doesn't feel antagonistic, but I feel like it acknowledges a lot of the re-screechers, if that makes sense. I don't know. Like it's there. The information's there. I don't quite know what to do with it. To me, it's kind of pulling me out of the video a little bit. But I'm sure for everyone else, I'm sure it's fine.
Our number 3 Pokemon is Salamence. Salamence is one of very, very few Pokemon that has won the World Championships 3 separate times. And to be clear, there's no Pokemon at the time I'm recording this that has ever won the World Championships 4 times, though I have a feeling that this year that will change when Incineroar inevitably takes the crown again. What makes Salamence so good is actually kind of tricky to answer. I think that part of the answer that we have to get out of the way right away is that it has a Mega Evolution, which was one of the top 3, if not top 2 Mega Evolutions. But the base form of Salamence was no slouch either. One of the times it won the World Championships was back in 2009 in Diamond and Pearl, which was before I started playing, so I can't say too much about it, but I imagine that having a Pokemon with that much stats, pre-nerfed dragon typing, no fairies around, a great ability, and a lot of other great things going for it was pretty valuable. When I started playing with Black...
I'm assuming pre-nerf dragon typing is referring to the fairy typing being introduced in Gen 6. Unless we're talking about a nerf that I don't know about, right? Like how Explosion got nerfed going from Gen 3 to Gen 4, right? Or how Steel type got nerfed by Dark not being able to be resisted by Steel type anymore. I don't remember a type specific nerf. So, I don't know. It was just I think he's referring to the fairy type, the advent of fairy typing in Gen 6.
And White, Salamence was one of the main dragon type Pokemon. I think what's nice about Salamence is that even though it's an offensive Pokemon, because it has this great defensive ability, it not only feels a lot tankier, but it also is able to work as both a offensive switch-in and a defensive switch-in as well. Salamence, when I started playing, was actually used as the anti-dragon dragon, where it would often hold the Choice Scarf to compensate for the fact that it wasn't quite as fast as other dragon type Pokemon, but with the Choice Scarf, it would outspeed them, and it could just KO them before they moved with Draco Meteor. Even though Salamance's physical attack stat was higher, it was mostly used as a special attacker because of how popular Intimidate is, which lowers the physical attack, and the fact that Draco Meteor is just a really, really good move. Salamence, like many other dragons, like many other pseudo-legendary Pokemon, has a really diverse move pool. It can use Flamethrower, it can use ground type moves. Its flying type moves aren't super good. It can use Hurricane, though that's really inaccurate if the rain isn't up. And actually, I told you about Metagross earlier, where I said, oh yeah, you use Bulldoze. What I didn't mention is that the Pokemon using Bulldoze was Salamence often. You would use Salamence Metagross, 2 pseudo-legendary Pokemon, Bulldoze, activate the weakness policy, and then use Metagross. And the Salamence was actually intended there to be very, very tanky. We've had a couple instances of extremely tanky Salamence being used, and yeah, like it's done pretty well. Really, the main reason that Salamence is this high, though, is the fact that Mega Salamence is just incredible. Mega Salamence was actually able to use flying type moves, unlike base Salamence, because its ability Aerialate turned normal type moves into flying type moves and gave them a damage boost. Now, there are
Dude, I miss my Mega Pinsir having Aerialate. I want it back. I miss my Mega Heracross having Skill Link. Bring Megas back.
Are a lot of really good normal type moves like Hyper Voice, which is high base power and hits both opponents with no drawback, and Double Edge or Return, which are really strong physical moves that just do immense amounts of damage. And when you give those flying typing plus a damage boost from being the same type as Salamence plus the damage boost from Aerialate, you can output pretty ridiculous damage as well. Salamence.
So I'm just now thinking about this. So you know how games will do things and then the game releases, and then because the game doesn't do well, the wrong conclusion gets drawn. I wonder if that's why we don't see Megas anymore. So let me clarify that. So like, what is it? Dragon Age Veilguard, right? Don't care about the game, right? I haven't played Dragon Age Origins. If I want to play Dragon Age, I'll play Dragon Age Origins, right? I guess EA took out of that. Allegedly, what they took out of that is players clearly want a live service game. That's what I'm talking about. Like, or Halo Infinite, right? Halo Infinite, just completely flatlining, right? For all intents and purposes. And well, but now you have season passes that don't go away. And so I'm like, oh no, here we go. It's going to be, well, players just don't feel incentivized to keep playing the game because the battle pass doesn't go away. Therefore, why would they play more? Why would they be more engaged? Oh God, like, please no. So let's go to a lot of Pokemon fans want Pokemon. Let's just bring back older Pokemon at this point. Bring back the top-down sprites. 3D thing's not really working in a lot of aspects, a lot of ways, which as far as I'm aware, sales figures do discount, as Scarlet and Violet have sold a lot of copies to my understanding. So going with that information, you have Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, right? For all intents and purposes, there's some really cool people doing some really cool mods, allegedly, who are doing really cool things with the game, like throwing Shadow Lugia in there, Armored Mewtwo in there. But because Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl went out and failed effectively in a lot of people's eyes, that makes me wonder if we will never see a return to old Pokemon like that. So thus leading into the topic at hand, where what game did have Mega Evolutions after Gen 7? Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. It makes me wonder if the widespread negative reception to Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee leads into Megas not coming back. I think we can debunk that at this point, though, because allegedly Legend Z to A, this reaction is being recorded before Z to A is out. Allegedly, and I'm actually keeping myself pretty spoiler free. Like I don't want to be spoiled until I actually play it. Allegedly, it's going into more megas and stuff, which I think a lot of people did like that. People had some reservations on Z moves. I think Z moves were a neat idea as an extension of megas. I think them work. I really think Gen 7 hit a nice balance between Z move and megas. Going into Dynamax, Gigantamax, I mean, itself was. A lot of people admitted that the mechanic was pretty busted. I myself have said the mechanic itself was led to a lot of balancing issues, especially when you're talking about Landorus Therian being unable to be one-shot by super effective moves. So, I don't know, just musing on potentially taking the wrong lesson out of things, and thus why we don't have certain things. Yeah.
Also gets a lot of useful supporting moves, like, well, mostly Tailwind. It gets one really useful supporting move, Tailwind. It can also use Roost to heal itself, so it's not like a one-trick pony. In fact, It can be either a physical or special attacker. It can set up Tailwind for the team. It can heal itself with Roost. It can even work as a physical setup sweeper with the move Dragon Dance, which actually won the World Championships back in 2018. It's an incredibly versatile Pokemon. Mega Elements was so good that it actually got nerfed after Generation 6 going into Generation 7. They lowered the boost that Aerialite did. Yeah. The thing is that this nerfed Mega Elements is the one that won the World Championships twice. What's interesting is that base Elements really played more as a dragon type, but Mega Elements played more as a flying type. And I think that's kind of like a cool, I don't know, I think that's kind of neat. Even though they're both Salamence, the way that they functioned offensively was actually kind of different, in part because of the moves that they actually got access to. I did initially have Salamence at number 2 on this list, but after giving it some thought, I decided that number 3 was a fair placement. But if you think it should be higher, that's honestly totally fair. This is by far one of the best Pokemon of all time. Forget Pseudo-Legendary. But the number 2...
But right there, that's how you handle it. If you think it should be higher, cool. Respect. Totally makes sense. Right there. Like that. 100%. Because there's definitely people who are going to put it at 1. There's definitely people who put it probably at like 7. That's why subjectivity exists. Why opinions exist. Just back your opinion up, right? Well, I think Mega Salamence I should think Salamence should be at number 2. Okay, why? I just think it should. Cool. Thank you for adding nothing to this conversation. No, I can pretty much agree to that. I think that's how megas are done correctly, though. So I think the core identity of the Pokemon is kept for all intents and purposes, right? Like it is still like a Heracross, right? But you do get alternative additional options, right? So you get access to Skill Link, right? Megas. I think that you're keeping the core identity of what Salamence is, but what side of its typing you're playing out of is a little different, right? It gives it a lot more utility while keeping the core identity. I think that's why Mega Garchomp to me fails a little bit. Like it goes more ham into, so it loses 10 speed, right? It goes down to 92, which does affect it a lot. But it gains attack. But that loss in speed, just a lot of people, me included, couldn't justify it. So I think that takes away from the core identity a little too much. Because it is now not a fast dragon type. It is a slower, harder hitting dragon type, which necessarily matched with Garchomp what it's necessarily known for, right? So I don't know. I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting to analyze this from a design standpoint.
Slot on our list goes to another Pokemon that is quite infamous, Tyranitar.
Yeah,
like Metagross, like Salamence, Tyranitar also has a Mega Evolution, although truthfully, most of Tyranitar's results come from its base form,
That means Chomp is number one, right?
which isn't like such the case with the other two. There's a lot that we could say about Tyranitar, but I think to start, the thing that's worth mentioning is that Tyranitar has one of the worst type combinations in the game, period. Rock and Dark is abysmal. The fact that it is such a good Pokemon, despite its awful typing, is really a testament to how incredibly strong it is. In my opinion, the tool that is most essential to Tyranitar's strength is its ability, Sandstream. This ability sets up the Sandstorm every time Tyranitar switches in, which not only enables other Pokemon like Excadrill, who can benefit from the sand, but it also increases Tyranitar's special defense by 50% because Rock-type Pokemon get tankier when the sand is up. This ability giving it like a 50% special defense boost in combination with the fact that it already has some of the best stats of any non-legendary Pokemon ever makes it just a monster. Tyranitar has been one of, if not the best Pokemon in multiple formats across multiple rule sets across multiple generations. It has an incredible move pool that allows it to function as a physical attacker or a special attacker, and it has pretty much every type of move it can want. I myself used Dragon Dance Tyranitar to get second at a regional in 2012, first at a regional in 2018, and first at nationals in 2012. And honestly, there might have been a couple other tournaments that I'm forgetting about as well. It's a really strong set, and it wasn't even the norm. People have used all kinds of different items on Tyranitar. Life Orb and Choice Band boosts its damage output. Choice Scarf makes it faster. Assault Vest makes it incredibly hard to get rid of. We've seen Weakness Policy Tyranitar many times. Oh yeah, Focus Sash, which is the one that I was talking about, the one that I used. Lumberry, it's so versatile in the items it can hold and the moves that it can use that it's just like so difficult to pin down. And I mentioned earlier, but Tyranitar stats are just unholy. Like, look at these things. It's just incredible. Tyranitar has only won the World Championships a single time, which is probably a little surprising for a Pokemon as good as Tyranitar. That being said, it did get second place 3 different times at the World Championships, so I feel like that kind of equates to at least a single win. Really, the reason that Tyranitar is higher than Salamence, despite having a third of the world victories, is because of how dominant it has been over the years. There are formats where having Tyranitar versus not having Tyranitar would have completely changed the landscape of the entire year. And it has been the best Pokemon, or at least top 5 in probably more formats than not. It's a Pokemon that truly warps the game around it, and even in formats where it's supposed to be bad, it still shows up and ends up doing well. In fact, earlier this year, Tyranitar was thought to be like, I don't know, not very good anymore. Like in the first year of Scarlet and Violet, it was pretty decent. It won a regional, it maybe had some other success, but then all these other Pokemon got added in, and we thought, okay, well, Landorus is back in the game, Rillaboom's back in the game. Like, Tyranitar probably can't do anything, right? There's not even like Excadrill isn't, I don't even know if it's in the game, but if it is, it's not very good, right? Tyranitar then went on to win a regional. Like, it was just like the GOAT. Yeah. I think the thing about Tyranitar is that the World Championships doesn't always tell the whole story, because at the end of the day, it is only a single weekend out of the year. And if you look at Tyranitar's results outside of World Championships, it's some of the most incredible and dominant that we have ever seen. And keep in mind that I'm kind of just talking about regular Tyranitar here. Mega Tyranitar has a lot of success as well, because normally you'd prefer to hold an item with Tyranitar, but there were use cases where having the Mega Evolution was actually more valuable for Tyranitar. Mega Tyranitar has a lot of first places across the board, including at an international level tournament, which again is very impressive. It does kind of pale in comparison to base Tyranitar, but that's only because base Tyranitar is so incredible, which just leaves the number 1 Pokemon.
So before we get into the number 1 slot, which I'm pretty sure is going to be Garchomp, right? Tyranitar seems like it's old reliable, right? It's been around since Gen 2, right? We talked about Dragonite being around since RBY. GSC is Tyranitar, right? We also want to talk about Kommo-o earlier, how the lack of its Z move kind of hurt it a little bit, right? But I mean, and so game mechanics going to the wayside and the Pokemon getting worse because of it. There are Pokemon like Mewtwo that really got hurt from the actual the special stat split, right? Like Gen 1 RBY having 1 stat special, Gen 2 forward, it is now special attack and special defense, right? Like Mewtwo kind of hurt from that, being unable to amnesia and just go up +2 in both special attack and special defense at one B, like one tempo, right? So there is that. However, going into Gen 2, like we had special and special defense being 2 separate stats already, right? We also then had the physical special split was not there yet, right? We had entire typings which were physical or special, right? It's why Sneasel wasn't really good in any capacity, because sure, it had the attack stat, but Ice and Dark, were they not special? So that led to issues like Flareon being unable to use its attack stat because Fire was inherently special type move up until Gen 4, and that's when the special split happened, Diamond Pearl Platinum, and then you move on from there, as now you have moves like Earthquake, which are physical, and Earth Power, which are special. Keeping that in mind, it's interesting to look at Tyranitar through the like retrospective lens to see that even after the physical special split, it just got better, and as many Pokemon did. Being able to go back all the way to Gen 2 GSC, this Pokemon has, for all intents and purposes, just kind of been a staple powerhouse of formats. It's really interesting to think about.
On our slot, the single best pseudo-legendary Pokemon. That honor goes to Garchomp. Basically, everything I said about Tyranitar is true about Garchomp as well. Garchomp was one of the best, if not the best Pokemon in multiple formats. It is a Dragon and Ground type Pokemon with incredible stats. A good attack stat, good bulk, and above average speed all combined to make it a really versatile Pokemon that can fill a lot of different roles. Ground and Dragon typing have incredible synergy because back in the day, the only Pokemon that could resist Dragon type moves were Steel types, which ground hits for super effective damage. Garchomp's abilities are also really threatening. The scarier one, in my opinion, is Sand Veil, which gives it an evasion boost whenever the sand is up, meaning the Garchomp paired especially well with Tyranitar, and then there was no guarantee you'd even hit it. There was actually a popular strategy of using Bright Powder to give yourself even more chances of dodging attacks with Sand Veil Garchomp, but it also can use the Rough Skin.
I do think that the usage statistics get shifted because Sandvale, well, I know Smogon-wise, wasn't it banned for a hot minute? It might still be banned in certain formats, right? And thus, that I think that's why we see a disproportionate amount of rough skin. I mean, I've been an advocate for just run Sandvale. I mean, 1 out of 5 times it works, right? Everyone is not necessarily running contact moves, right? Like, not everyone's doing a Mach Punch. Not everyone's doing Extreme Seed. So rough skin could potentially be a dud ability, right? However, if you are running a sand team, why not run Sandvale, especially if it's legal in something like VGC, right? Like that's really been my logic behind that. I think Sandvale does have a little more utility. I think it has probably a little less consistency than Rough Skin. Rough Skin does do the 12.5% of max HP, so it just depends what you're building into. I think that's subjective per team, but depending on the team you're running.
Ability, which is especially valuable when Pokemon that hit multiple times that make contact, like Kangaskhan or Urshifu, are in the format. Garchomp can be a setup sweeper with Swords Dance. It can hold a Choice Band to get more damage, or Life Orb to get more damage. It can hold Choice Scarf. It can hold Assault Vest. It can hold a berry that reduces damage, like Yachi Berry. Or I actually won Nationals with an incredibly slow and bulky substitute Garchomp with the berry that reduces Dragon type moves, Havenberry. So you could even take powerful hits like Latios Draco Meteor and then still have enough HP to use substitute later. Garchomp is also really scary because it can boost its attack stat with Swords Dance, and if you ignore it and give it a Swords Dance, it starts doing ridiculous amounts of damage, especially because for a long time its speed stat was faster than the norm. That has changed a little bit.
It was, yeah. It's 102. 102 it's White Blow Slagging out of the water. The Swords Dance animation from, I think that's Oraz, right? I miss it. I do miss it. It reminds me of the swords from Wind Waker.
With Scarlet and Violet and Sword and Shield adding so many fast and powerful Pokemon. But for a while, I mean, Garchomp was over the bar you had to clear to be considered faster than most. Garchomp won the World Championships twice in 2 different generations, Black and White and X and Y. I should also probably mention Garchomp did get a Mega Evolution, but it wasn't very good and didn't really have any results. It was slower than regular Garchomp, and it got like a ton of special attack, as I recall, so it wasn't really worth using over the base form, but it did exist. I should mention it. It's really hard to overstate how strong Garchomp was. It dominated in Pokemon Black and White's era. It dominated in Pokemon X and Y's era. It was also really good. It was maybe the best, maybe not the best, but it was one of the best Pokemon in the first year of Sun and Moon as well. And it was
one of the best Pokemon in its debut generation, Gen 4, right? Diamond and Pearl. Did we not have things like Chain Chomp? I mean, False Swipe Gaming actually has an excellent video on the history of Garchomp and like how versatile and how just rough, pun intended, this thing was, right? Like this thing was a force of nature.
Pretty decent in Scarlet and Violet's first year, though I would say it wasn't as incredible, though that's in part because, I mean, Flutter Maidens added to the game, and so a lot of Dragon type Pokemon were struggling. Anyway, I think Garchomp is just incredible. It's so versatile. It has so much it can do, and it really kind of ran the game for like 3 generations. It's pretty remarkable, honestly. And that's the reason that I have it as the best pseudo-legendary Pokemon of all time. And that's my ranking of all 10 pseudo-legendary Pokemon. If you want to hear more about some other Dragon type Pokemon that were really strong, as well as some of the Pokemon on this list, you might like this video I made on the best Dragon type Pokemon of all time.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with everything you said here. Even if I were to maybe potentially contest some of these positions, right? Like, I think for the most part, he brought a very educated argument for each of them. And that's really all you can ask. That's all you can ask from anybody, right? Why do you think Garchomp is the best? Have you seen this speed stat? Have you seen the amount of placements it has? Have you seen how just this just dominated, right? Why is T-Tar number 2 over Salamence? Well, I mean, it's been around longer. This is my reasoning for this, right? Like, I think that a lot of people get lost in the sauce, and it really is unfortunate. And this is what he was calling out through the video, right? These people who are going to like just absolutely tear him apart, right? Like, and I to agree as well. Like, I'm very adversarial over dumb criticism. Absolutely valid criticism, constructive criticism. Cool. No, totally makes sense. When we talk about like just dumb criticism, that's a whole different subject entirely, right? But no, I mean, he brought an educated argument for each of these. I think that a lot of it made sense. I think absolutely, if you think that something should be shifted up or down or completely placed entirely different, I mean, you're entitled to that opinion. Just be able to back it up, and that's all anyone can really ask from you. So thank you, Wolfglick, for providing just an excellent video, in my opinion. I think this was awesome. I think this was a really cool dive into the history of competitive Pokemon from the VGC side of things. Obviously, if you're looking for Smogon, that would be a different subject entirely. But from the VGC side of things, it was pretty good. I also want to reiterate, I want to be as transformative and just add what commentary I can, because at the end of the day, it's just respectful, right? It's like, sure, I could just sit here and go, oh, that's neat, but what am I adding to the work, right? Especially when people, him and his entire team, work very hard to make a production like this. And I think that's the important thing to remember in regards to, as I said earlier, like allegations and stuff, right? Look, at the end of the day, Pokemon has less cheating overall if the actual mechanics actually address the issues, right? Make a negative bottle cap, make it so people don't have to, like, you know, go find, quote unquote, 0 IV Torkoals, right? Make it easier to modify EVs, make it easier to modify IVs, make bottle caps that grindable resource, right? Like, am I saying that everything needs to be handed on a silver platter? No. But like, we clearly have things in games like Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee where you talk to, is it Celadon City? Where you talk to the lady inside the Pokemon Center. It's where the game corner is, right? Celadon. And you talk to her and she's like, oh, well, what is the red flower? Oh, what is the blue flower? Okay. So if you do like red flower attack, blue flower special attack, oh, every Pokemon today will be adamant. We've literally solved the nature issue. Like, sure, we have mints and stuff as well, and I think you can couple that with that. But every Pokemon that day you can catch is adamant. Like, we literally have systems that have solved this. So my criticism lies in, look, as someone who is a former professor, I can't okay cheating. I can't in good faith say to cheat. I can't in good faith say to gen Pokemon, hack Pokemon, bring them to tournaments, etc. What I can say is you inherently deal with a lot of these issues by making sure people have ready access to things like 0 IV Torkoals and come to your own educated conclusions from there. Obviously have your own opinion as long as it's educated. So as much as we have allegations in regards to a Magmar that floated around, look, I don't have the tournament records. I looked at it once upon a time. At the end of the day, does it really matter? Not really, in my opinion. So yeah. Cool. Thank you, Wolfglick, for putting together an interesting video. Thank you to Wolfglick's team for putting together just an awesome production. I found a lot of value in this, and hope you did as well. Link to the original content in the description down below. And I'll see you in the next one.